applause for him. Sit anywhere. Thank you. Moving on, the next we have Mr. Ravi Kumar Tumalapalli, Managing Director, VacuTech. We now have Mr. Pradnesh Chodankar, Senior Vice President and Head Procurement, DBS Bank. And to moderate this session, I may now call upon Mr. Apurva Mankad, Founder and CEO, Web Express Transportation SAS. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. I think this is one of the tough sessions because everybody had lunch, and lunch was sumptuous. So, the body will do its job and make your eyes droop. So it's our job not to let you sleep and make sure that this particular session is interesting to the extent possible. So we have sustainability as a topic, especially in the supply chain. And we've got some stalwarts who worked in this sector for decades who will be able to share a lot of things with us. Just to quickly set a background, we all have heard about sustainability. Everybody is today talking about, carbon footprint, reducing the entire greenhouse gas emission, etc. But let me start by something which can be very, very personal to all of us who are in the city of Mumbai. DNB decided to have this event in JW Marriott in Juhu. We are really not sure after 25 years JW Marriott in Juhu will be there. Because a lot of people are predicting that the water level will rise so much that the Juhu beach itself will go away, because 3 more feet of water, 4 more feet of water, is no Juhu beach. And the water level will rise so much that you will not be able to push out any of the drains from areas in Juhu vicinity into the water, which incidentally happens to be below the level of, sea. Many of you may not know, entire Juhu scheme is below the, sea level. In that case, you will not have a JW Marriott. Very recently, my daughter asked me that, Dad, I don't want to live in Mumbai. I said, why? What's wrong with Mumbai? Pollution? I said, no, it's going to drown. I said, drown? Like when? I said, 2050 it will drown. I calculated and said, 2050, okay, I'm not going to be around mostly. So, but then from their perspective and our children's perspective and future generation, sustainability is becoming a very, very, big area, right? India, by the way, is at a very interesting position, because we are today the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases today. On a per capita basis, we'll probably come 15, 20th or somewhere, but on total number, we are 3rd after China at number 1, 9 billion tons, USA at around 5 billion tons, and we are around 2 billion tons of greenhouse gases. But what is more alarming is that we will be the largest consumer of fuel in terms of growth in next 20, 30 years. We are not going to stop driving cars. We have more and more diesel and petrol being consumed. EV will come. In such a light, how exactly the supply chain risks are happening and the sustainability risks are happening, how do MSMEs will comply and manage all of that is the topic for our discussion today. So I'll say it's a very, very, very important topic, maybe not felt so much by our generation sitting in this room today, but in next years, 10 years, 15 years, I think this is going to be the only topic where most of the people will be focused upon. So let me start this panel discussion by asking Ravi out here, who has spent some fantastic number of years in supply chain management as well as on the pharmaceutical side, that SMEs especially, we are going to talk about, face a lot of challenges in many ways, and supply chain being one of them. Sustainability is the next one, as I am talking about out here. Now, especially in last 2 years, what has been the experience of, people like you, companies like yours, where there have been a lot of, disruptions of supply chain globally. How exactly it impacted your business, the companies that you work for especially, and how exactly your company dealt with those challenges is something we would like to know, especially from a sustainability and a supply chain point of view. Maybe first from supply chain disruption point of view, maybe you can answer. Yeah?
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, BND, for having me here on the panel discussion on this topic of sustainability. Of course, just a small caveat that I represent a company called VacuTech. VacuTech is into thermal packaging solutions, and whatever opinions which I am sharing today is all my personal opinions, and it is not my company's stand. So basically, Vacutech is an thermal packaging solutions company, and then we are a German organization. While we talk about sustainability, Vacutech as an organization, we are already carbon neutral. And basically, most of us, we have not even heard about being carbon negative. So basically, we already have a goal of being carbon negative in the next 5 years. So when we talk about thermal insulation packaging, basically we develop reusable packaging solutions which reduces the need for having one-time package solutions which we at the end of the day dispose of, like EPS boxes or plastic bags, etc. So that is just a background, but I come from a pharmaceutical background. I was heading supply chain and logistics for the last 24 years with large multinational pharmaceutical companies. And what we have seen, is unprecedented. Everyone has gone through this phase in the last 2 years. At least most of us being in this room, we have seen the pandemic situation for the first time in our life. And I think it came very strong, very hard on us when the lockdowns were implemented. And probably pharmaceutical companies or the professionals were the only ones who were in the forefront, because most of the things, like wearing the mask or sanitizers, which are quite common in the pharmaceutical company, whether it is a manufacturing site or warehouses or the logistics entities. But no one expected that they will have to wear the mask even though they are in the house, they are in the public transport, they are outside on the roads. That caused quite a lot of disruption. Now, how is it impacting our business? Large pharmaceutical companies could get over this immediate impact of lockdowns and closures. One, because pharmaceutical companies keep at least about 3 to 4 months of raw material inventory. It is only the packaging material or the secondary packaging material or shipping packaging material which they don't keep so much of inventory. But whereas raw materials and excipients was not an immediate hindrance when the lockdowns were implemented. But of course, no one knew how long the lockdown will be there, how long the supply disruption will be there, when will we get the next supply of raw materials from our neighboring countries or wherever it is. That was a big question. So the first immediate requirement was to address the current requirement, which is antibiotics, vaccines or injectables, what is needed for the COVID treatment. And hence, all the manufacturers had to change their manufacturing plans, immediately jump into the urgent requirement medicines, and then see what is available in their own resources, which is like raw materials or packaging materials. Packaging materials, as I mentioned, is a major component for manufacturing of the pharmaceutical products, and particularly you cannot have new suppliers qualified overnight. And the old suppliers, though they had their manufacturing facilities or capacity available, but because of the lockdown, their employees were not able to come to the factories. They were not able to produce anything. So I appreciate the efforts which have been done by the government in bringing in so much of agility from the ministries, from the secretaries, and they gave special permissions for the manufacturers, particularly the essential goods manufacturers where pharmaceuticals fall into, for opening the manufacturing sites and starting their operations. It is not only the manufacturers of the medicines, but the suppliers who are supplying their materials to the pharma companies also, they were given approvals later. So I think in nutshell, if you look at large pharma companies, they got over and they could get a formula kind of thing, when the pandemic struck, and quickly they were able to be back on their feet. But specifically when you are talking about SME and then MSMEs, where it is not only the employees there, but basically the permissions, the working capital, These were all major issues where the pharma companies have supported them in giving additional credit period. There were some companies who have given loans also to SMEs to manufacture the products which were needed during the pandemic time. But broadly, if you see, yes, MSMEs are the critical part of the economy now. And any industry you talk about, whether it is automobile ancillaries, whether you talk about small and medium pharmaceutical companies, the suppliers of packaging materials, suppliers of raw materials, and particularly given the kind of government initiatives which are coming up right now, I'm sure there's a lot of focus and impetus on the startups and the MSMEs than before.
No, thanks a lot, Ravi, for giving a perspective of large company and how they also connected to the smaller companies. Very interestingly, you mentioned that at least in one sector, the larger companies actually help the smaller companies by giving more working capital. I think that must have really helped the supply chain overall. I think it's a point to be noted by a lot of MSMEs to really go back to their companies and say, we are crucial to you. Coming to the sustainability part, and let me take this question to Balwant, who does a very interesting work in the area of sustainability advisory and has a very vast experience on the energy sector and multiple other industrial sectors. I am an MSME. I'm really environmentally keen. I really want to start a sustainability initiative, right? It's one thing for, let's say, a large company to say, I'm going to have a chief supply chain, chief, sustainability officer. I'm going to have an entire department look after that. But how an MSME, what kind of challenges in your experience they face if they want to do a sustainability initiative? And how can they go about it? I think if you can throw some light on that.
Thanks, Apurva. Thanks, DNB, for inviting me over here. If you are a MSME and you are really keen on sustainability initiatives, let me tell you, you are the rare species. Okay? Pardon me for my pun, but that's the reality. In fact, when I saw the question, what is the biggest challenge that SMEs face in implementing sustainability, it's a lack of desire, lack of priority on the part of MSME owners. And this comes from our experience of working with at least 400, 450 MSMEs across the country. Why there is a lack of priority or lack of desire? It's obviously it's not mandatory. It's not mandatory for MSMEs. MSMEs don't fall part of the PAT scheme, which is for the large industries, 1,000 large industries in the country. MSMEs are not part of the BRSR reporting guidelines or any of the GRI reporting guidelines. As a result of that, it is not mandatory for the MSMEs to implement sustainability initiatives. And when I say sustainability initiatives, I would put them in three large buckets. One is energy efficiency, wherein you reduce your energy requirements. Second is renewable energy, start procuring green power related or green products. And the third one is lean manufacturing. As far as the third part is concerned, the challenge is in terms of the financing. However, the first two is a lack of awareness and lack of prioritization, which also comes, one of the reasons for that is also the lack of availability of finance. And many a times the MSMEs are so stressed for money that they would prefer to install a new equipment than try to do anything which is energy efficiency or the smart manufacturing. So these are the challenges, but the situation is going to change very soon. In fact, many of those units must be aware, EU is trying to implement CBAM, that is a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which would be mandatory for any export to EU, which would make it, and which takes into consideration the scope 3 emissions also. So scope 3 emissions would essentially cover entire supply chain of the large exporters, and that would become it mandatory. And then it will become mandatory, and then people would start implementing it. But in terms of the challenges, the broad 3-4 areas which I would say, the top is of course lack of priority, lack of awareness, non-availability of finance, lack of technology, and the last one is a lack of support from the what I would say is the institutional mechanism or a policy mechanism that is available to implement sustainability measures.
And Thanks a lot, Balwant. And you said lack of desire, and you put a controversial point out here. A lot of people in the audience may not agree, saying that no, we absolutely desire to do it. But as you then mentioned that many of the other areas might then come in the way for sure. And let me tell you, the lack of desire exists also in very large corporations. It need not be only in the MSMEs, I'll say. Let me change the topic a little slightly, expand the topic a little on the risk management side of it. And especially, we all have seen supply chain has become a risky area. We never thought supply chain is risky area. It used to work, truck aayega, truck jayega, material will come, material will go. Nobody bothered about it really. Suddenly we found cars cannot be manufactured. Why? Somewhere, some chip is not happening. I was told very interestingly in Taiwan, one of the reasons the manufacturing couldn't happen because they had a drought. And the chip manufacturing required a lot of water. And the Taiwanese government obviously said that people are going to drink water first and then you will make the chips. And then that was one of the reasons, not the only one, for the entire sustained chips shortages, which are only now, I'm told, becoming a little lesser. So let me come to Pradnesh on this particular area. Now, he has worked lifetime in procurement with large organizations like Unilever and many others. One of the key job obviously is to make sure that things are procured and things are with you. How exactly, first of all, you identify the risk? What exactly do you do as a company to first, what kind of systems you put in place, what kind of process you put in place? If you can just throw on light, that it's easy to say risk. How do you go about identifying a supply chain risk? Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, thanks, Apurva. Welcome all MSME guys. In fact, I would just like to start with a small story which I would like to dedicate to you guys. So MSMEs, now we have been talking about them, but I think so they have a background for thousands of years back, isn't it? Can you imagine did we ever had global organization manufacturing bows and arrows during Mahabharata and Ramana days? Isn't it? There were Arjunas and all who used to go with those small MSME players, give the specifications to them and say that, listen, I need a sword which is better than someone else. And, accordingly, there was a MSME guy who used to make sword, who used to make bows, who used to make arrows, and he used to manage the supply chain very well, isn't it? So now the things have become a bit complicated, isn't it? The global organizations have come, and now they have a processes in place, they have a sustainability, they have risk, they have reputation. So every single thing, I think so we are now coming with the same circle, right? MSME, global organizations, now we are actually want MSMEs to actually contribute for the economy for the country. Yes, I think so it does play a key role. So most of the global organizations where I work with, Unilever or Abbott, there is very clear process of, plan, source, make and deliver. Okay. However, when you go through this entire cycle, there is a huge capital investments which are there. And whether we talk about, if you want to have your in-house manufacturing facility, you need to have a factory, you need to have machinery, you need to have manpower. And what happens if your product fails? If your product fails, then the write of cost is huge, it's massive. So in such case, there's a huge risk for any MSME to start or invest that much amount. So most of the MSME, they will try to see to it that they market it. So while they market those products, the risk still lies with them, because just imagine a fairness cream. Someone manufactures, markets a fairness cream, and a customer has an allergy. Okay, and therefore there are a lot of risk involved in order to outsourcing. When you talk about doing an outsourcing, so the outsourcing you need to have. I think so. One of the big things what banking does is a DNB report. So when when MSMEs wants to get into understanding the risk factors in terms of its financial risk, in terms of all the government regulations, it's very much important that you mitigate all the risk. If you want to manufacture an Ayurvedic cream, you need an Ayurvedic license. You generally cannot manufacture an Ayurvedic cream. So All those things are equally important when any small middle scale enterprises wants to launch a product. They need to ensure that all the risks are covered, and only when they get a sign off on all those items, they can go ahead and tie up with that particular manufacturing setup.
Yeah, but let me add to that. And you said a very nice process, but don't you think this becomes very costly for a smaller organization? See, in a larger organization, you can put this entire process in place. You can probably put a team to do that job. Now, in an MSME especially scenario, where you have limited resources in many different ways, do you really think, is there a lighter version? Is there a light version of this kind of a process? Can it be done? Or you will simply advise saying that, okay, you do it at a smaller scale, but still do the entire whole 9 yards of process?
So basically, most of the MSMEs are, they start with the regional markets. So their potential risk is very limited, okay? And there are, certain demographics, and they will only play around that particular region. However, I personally believe that the risk factors has to be mitigated, okay? Because we cannot run the show. You cannot have an investments, you cannot have your product launch without actually understanding the supply chain risk where the manufacturing happens. So it's very, very important, because most of the manufacturers are aggregators. They don't just manufacture for Unilever or Colgate, they manufacture for various companies. So even if you're going for this, aggregator, you need to ensure that they, all the regulations are well followed, and all the risks are getting mitigated. Thanks.
Thanks, Pradnesh. Ravi, I would like to come to you for a very specific area related to supply chain risk again. See, we all know that quality is extremely important, and everybody strives to obviously procure material by balancing. Even the MSMEs will try to balance the quality of the material versus the price. That we always do. But in the times of supply chain disruption, now let me give an example. Like when the entire COVID disruption was on, there was simply no containers available to ship things. I'm an exporter, I'm an MSME. I have no way to export things, even though I'm manufacturing very quality product. What did a company like Amazon did? They went on and simply bought a ship. They say, I have my own ship, my own containers. Now they can do it, and they can sustain their entire supply chain and manage the risk. But an MSME, when they want to compete in such a disruptive environment, how will they compete to still get the best product without really paying over the price? Because the other way is you simply, participate in a beauty contest, give maximum possible money, and then, make your production run. Is there any way to manage that? And we all have to understand that this risk was not past. We keep on talking about COVID as a past, thankfully. Supply chain risk happened, that happened. Believe you me, this is like going to happen every 3, 4, 5 years. Some of the other event will come. We all were out of COVID, and now you got a Ukraine war on you, for example. We really don't know what 23 is holding for us. So how, on an ongoing basis, I make sure that I still maintain quality, not overpay, but, I'm working against a very large organization. How do I do it MSME?
I think, Apurva, you touched upon a point which is more than an MSME topic, because when we are talking about supply chain disruption, there are many disruptions. Like every year there is some other disruption. You have an economic crisis, you have an inflation crisis, you have an Suez Canal crisis, you have COVID. So basically all the supply chain guys, I don't know how many of you manage your own supply chains also, but this is not going to end. And I thought I have seen enough of supply chain disruptions, my hair is gone, but more are coming. So we have to be prepared for the eventuality, prepare for such disruptions to happen. And coming to how large organizations are dealing, probably I'll touch upon slightly on how the large organizations are doing. Is basically earlier we used to talk about demand planning or forecasting in terms of understanding the market requirement and accordingly produce the products and maintain certain amount of inventory. But today it is not done, or forecasting or demand planning is not done in silos, but basically it is called IBP, Integrated Business Planning. So integrated business planning is taking a larger role beyond S&OP, beyond demand planning, wherein as an organization, how much risk appetite do we have? How much working capital we can put into our inventory, how much customer service what we are looking at. I think there are many aspects which are coming into the discussion of IBP, integrated business planning. And that is where the organization or the board or the senior directors of the company would take a decision in terms of working capital or risk appetite. Similarly, I think in MSMEs, if you look at it, is much more easier. It is only an intent which you need to have because the decision making is much more faster. The visibility of your supply chain is very clearly in front of you, and the risk appetite also you know it. So it is only an intent in terms of seeing how you want to redesign your supply chain, how you want to ensure that your whole production or supply chain processes are not disrupted or not getting impacted in this kind of eventualities. Now, during the COVID, I think this was once in a lifetime situation where we have seen the container freight rates going up or air freight rates going up. Even there was a situation where we came across where the shipping lines were auctioning the containers. Now, $350 or $400 used to be a container price, and then that went up to about $15,000, $16,000 because the availability itself was an issue there. So I personally, if you ask me, this is a situation where none of us should get into in the future. But there are a lot of startups who have come to the forefront in terms of technology. There's a lot of digitization which is available today. A lot of digitization has come in freight booking. So earlier we used to talk to a customs agent or we used to talk to a freight forwarder. Yaar, mere ko container chahiye, next week mein chahiye, 3 container chahiye. We used to talk to them. But today there are so many portals which are available where the rates are transparent, the availability is transparent, the schedules of the shipping lines is transparent, and I feel it's a time that we need to get onto that bandwagon of digitization and then utilize these services from the integrators or the digital freight forwarders who are available. I think this is one thing which can really help us to see what is the market. If everyone is facing the problem of shortage, then obviously we cannot do much. We will have to look at alternate ways. But basically, if the whole world is going through the crisis, I think that is where will be a little challenging. But we have to be prepared in advance in terms of looking at how is our inventory, how is your supply planning basis your demand.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. I think you touched a very good topic about digitization. You said that why not use certain tools? And let me take that to Balwant, who, as a part of his work, also has a digital, initiative which he advises the companies over and even provides technology support. What specific digital tools you will talk about, especially in the area of one, sustainability? Are there digital tools by which I can put some kind of a score and say, like he gave the example, I can go online and book something. In sustainability area, are there digital tools? Are they emerging? Are they available? That was one thing I wanted to know from your side. And do they ultimately help me also in saving costs? Because see, one thing you said is desire. One thing probably you did not mention is, which MSME will always agree with you, saying if you help me to reduce cost, I'll do it first. Right? My desire will immediately come if you can help me reduce cost. So do these digital tools help me, one, to do the sustainability initiative as well as somewhere, help me to even save costs? Let me take an example. For example, if I have a tool to find out, as he gave the example of, supply chain trucking, if I can find a cheaper truck, right, I'll be very happy as an MSME if there is a digital tool is available. But it also will help me that if I am able to optimize the number of trucks, reduce the number of trucks, I'm also saving the environment to a certain extent. So can you throw some light in your awareness? What are the emerging tools right now?
Yeah, thanks. Industry 4.0, I think that's the buzzword that is typically used for all these IoT-based solutions, which are used either for the improvement in the industrial efficiency, productivity, as well as related to the sustainability. On the sustainable, so there are lots of tools available. Many players are there in the market who provide this tool. Either my company also provides, we call it a Watt Guru, we are focused only on energy efficiency and the renewable energy related tools. The challenge with the implementing these tools in SME, our experience is these tools have to be customized a lot for SME. Unlike the large tools, you go to the steel plant or aluminum plant, where what happens is that only the number of pots change, but the system is same across, which is a large. So the per unit cost of implementation of the tool is very low. Okay, as compared to MSME, where every configuration is different. Every MSME, even in the textile sector, is different. A lot of MSMEs in the pharma sector are different from one another. So their production processes are typical. They have typically evolved with the different generation of machines. As a result of that, the cost of implementation of these tools and the effort that is needed to implement these tools increases. It's very easy to implement these tools. Say, suppose there is a Domino's Pizza, 1,000 outlets, yeah, or bank branches, 1,000 bank branches, it's fine. But you go and talk to 10 textile units or 10 paper and pulp units and try to implement the same IoT tool, it's not easy. So that's whether they save energy or they save money for the owner, 100% they save. But the effort that is required for that and the kind of transparency that is needed to really implement and make use of those tools is some of those things are sometimes missing. And that's a bigger challenge, and that's the reason you would see uptake of these tools in the MSME sector is much lower as compared to the large industrial sector.
So you are going to talk about the next level of ERP implementation. I think we face similar issues in the ERP generation at that point of time where MSMEs faced a lot of issues deploying an ERP because, again, customization, cost per unit, etc., similar issues. So Pradesh, let me take that same question to you. These challenges exist, we appreciate. But in your opinion, are there ways in which maybe you can even share the practices used by larger companies, maybe the companies that you have been exposed to? Because sometimes what may happen that maybe we can do a smaller version of it in the MSME from that example. So if you can take certain examples in same area.
Yeah, thanks. So basically, it all starts with collecting the information, analyzing the information, interpreting the information, and getting it practically implemented. Okay. So for any manufacturing organization, it's important to have a better demand planning kind of stuff. Okay. There are various tools which have come up like artificial intelligence in order to understand how the winter will be this year. I'll just give a classic example of cold creams. So how do you predict winter? So if you produce excess, it's a write-off because nobody in India would use cold cream after February, especially in areas like Mumbai. You hardly have 2 months of winter. Okay, so it's very much important to understand how the winter would be. Use artificial intelligence, and all this process of packing material, raw material goes 6 months before. Okay, so if you want to have your primary sales in the month of November, you need to have stocks ready on the shelf in the month of September. And your production planning process has to start in the month of April. So how do you know sitting in April how good or bad the winter would be? So these are the tools. You want the historical data, use all those data in terms of how the predictive analysis work in terms of how the winter would be. Keep your packing material ready in case if the winter increases. You need to have a quick turnaround time in terms of making the goods available in the market so that there is no loss of sale in order to protect rather than having a stock write-off. It's better to be proactive and have an agile supply chain, use digital tools to have a foresight in terms of how do you plan to deliver the goods which are required on time.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Pradnesh, for that. About the digital tools, let me add a couple of things. I think you mentioned that MSMEs will find it difficult. One of the things maybe I can suggest is, in my experience working with a lot of companies, is that even the smallest of organizations or mid-sized organizations try to, when they look at an ERP or a digital tool or an IoT, they try to look at 100% benefits. And they try to benchmark themselves with maybe what they would have probably heard, what Unilever did, or let's say Tata's did, etc. I mean, one of the things they can do is apply what we call as Pareto principle. Take the tool as is, where is basis, and say, ये जितना करता है इतना पहले उसमें से juice ले लेते हैं. Then I'll worry about doing the customization, because I'm pretty sure you will agree that even at base level, most of the digital tool will deliver some value. Okay, they will deliver 50% of the value, but it is more than 0%. But in attempt to achieve 100% value or 95% value, you spend so much of time and effort and spend money that you do not even achieve 10%, and of course there will be disappointment, and obviously first person to blame will be the digital tool itself, saying that tool is really not really helpful per se. So I will say this may be true even for larger organizations. I'll not say even for small organizations, but one of the way they can deploy some of the IoT tools, etc., by taking a ready solution available. Ravi mentioned that a lot of startups are available for doing that today. Towards the last part of our discussion today, we talked about sustainability, we talked about how we reduce the risk, how we build resilience, what kind of digital tools we can get for supply chain. Now the most important part and most important question: how do you help MSMEs negotiate better in the supply chain perspective? Because there is always a David versus Goliath issue, that the large guy is going to sit across the table and say that I'm going to buy your entire production capacity. So, bhao bol boss, मैं करके देता हूँ, पूरा खरीद के लेता हूँ, right? And MSMEs obviously are trying to achieve that particular maximum possible sale. Can you share some tips with our audience out here, especially from supply chain point of view, where the MSMEs can negotiate better with organizations like yours? Because you sit on the opposite side, right? You know many secrets which probably MSMEs don't know. And I would like this question to be answered by all of you, maybe in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, I think, see, it is not, probably I'll little generalize this question, Apurva, because it is not only MSMEs, but basically, if you look at the current business environment, Atmanirbhar, Gati Shakti, these are the big multi-billion-dollar projects which are coming up, and then all of them are focused on localization, which itself, in a way, is a very big opportunity for MSMEs in any sector we are talking about. So coming specifically to supply chain, COVID disruption taught us that it is better to have your supplier next door rather than looking for some global supplier having, beautiful quality, beautiful supply chain processes, scale, whatever you call it. And then today, it is much more important for us, for our supplier or for our vendor to be next door. One. Second, but basically this also is very important for us, that our manufacturing processes, our quality standards have to be upgraded, and it is not only the cost always, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry. If you look at, definitely the cost is important, but basically more important is quality of the product, quality of the packaging material, or quality of raw materials is very important, so that your product is getting approved. And another third point, what I would say is, how are you differentiating yourself with competition? Differentiation is very important. It could be in product quality, it could be in documentation, it could be in customer service, it could be in terms of how fast and how agile your systems are in order to adopt change. So probably these three things are very important in today's circumstances, which a principal organization would look at hiring or giving contracts to their suppliers.
Thanks, Ravi. Pradnesh, you have been a procurement person all your life. I'm sure you know at least 5 secrets you can share with our audience about the procurement guy sitting on the opposite side.
So I would rather say I would go the other way around. Okay, I would urge the MSMEs to have those uniqueness. Okay, if there are 10 people giving the same kind of solution and its price is the only differentiator, then you will always lose. Okay, because there are certain point of time where you need to have your margins, which has to be taken care of. Okay, there are many guys who cut off their margin in order to gain the gain the orders. But I think so what should differentiate you, and I would urge that your, uniqueness, how different is your product, how agile is your, customer service, and look at the differentiator aspect as compared to other 9 players. Okay, and that is where, because everybody, for example, everybody has a customer, right? Say, sales team, marketing team is my customer. Okay, so today, sitting on the chair procurement, there are expectations on turnaround time for me. And how do you see, whenever you approach any procurement head, I would say that you need to step into his shoes and understand how can you help him achieve his KRA. Okay, because he looks good. Because I personally believe that, my suppliers, my vendors, we don't call them suppliers, vendors, they call them business partners. They are my extended part of team. End of the day, only if they succeed, I succeed. If they fail, I fail. So it's very much important to understand what is needed, what is that unique thing which you have, which others 9 guys don't have. And you need to pitch on those aspects of differentiation and uniqueness rather than only say, I'm cost effective. Okay, so
thanks a lot. I think famous last words for Balwant. Yeah, maybe 15 seconds.
Yeah, sure. I think moving forward, sustainability is going to be the driving factor. And whatever, we have had a full cycle moving from globalization to localization. We have given them, it's a very interesting word, we call it a disaster resilient framework or disaster resilient infrastructure. But what essentially it means is that your supply chains are localized. And that is what is going to drive the industry, SMEs moving forward. And in the localization part of it, your energy related needs, your resource related needs are going to play an important role. So figure out how do we really minimize the external dependence and localize your own supply chains as a part of the business strategy.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think we had a great round of discussion with all of you. I hope we made good value of your time, and we thank the audience for listening to us, and thanks to Dan Bradstreet as well. Many thanks to all of you. Thank you.
Gentlemen, please stay for some time on the stage. And thank you for your insights on building sustainable supply chain management for SMEs. May I request Dr. Arun Singh to kindly come on the stage and felicitate our panelists. Starting with Mr. Mankad. Can we have a huge round of applause? Followed by Mr. Joshi, Mr. Tumalapalli, and Mr. Chodankar. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a huge round of applause? Come on, we can do better. Thank you, gentlemen. Moving on to our next panel discussion on brand building for entrepreneurs, SMEs, and business innovation. I'm going to take this opportunity to invite on stage our next set of panelists.